Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. This is our 36th year bringing stories from around the world. One of our favorite documentaries this year is Queer Exile Berlin. Let me read a brief description and then we're going to discuss the film with the director. Queer people from all over the world have made Berlin what it is today. Many leave their home because they want to, other because they have to. The film follows a few of them. Please welcome the director of Queer Exile Berlin, Johan Hick.
Thank you for having me here. Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing the film with us, and thank you so much for spending time to talk with us today. Well, first of all, I just want to ask you a little bit about yourself as a filmmaker, and yourself as someone who lives in Berlin.
hmm I'm a filmmaker since many years. I did my first film, which was even in multiplex cinemas in New York back in '89, which was called Via Appia,
Mm-hmm.
which was one of the first films of Strand releasing
Yeah.
and one of their first successes. And then I went on. Because fiction was really difficult to finance. I only did like two feature fiction films. I did mainly documentaries about queer themes, and I started with Men Maniacs: The Legacy of Leather, Sex Life in LA, Cycles of Porn, East West, Sex and Politics, like different things, all about like a little bit like the social workings within the queer community, which I'm more interested. And also, it's a little bit like not so much like translating for everyone everywhere in the world, but maybe also a little bit like films for enhanced thinkers and people. This is at least what I try to do. And so I lived for a long while in Hamburg, where still is my main residence, but I'm also living in Berlin now for over 20 years. But it's been more than far more than 40 years than I was for the first time in Berlin when there was still the wall. And I've been visiting, I've been at the Berlin Film Festival maybe 30, 35 times, I don't
Oh
know.
wow.
Uh, uh, and uh, and with films maybe 10 or 11 times. I've been regularly visiting the city, and I'm living there for now maybe almost 25 years. And so I I found it pretty interesting when I arrived that there was no film really about queer history in Berlin. There was no film about East Berlin or the former GDR back then. There was no film about West Berlin. So I started this trilogy. First, it was only one film. The first film was out in East Berlin, which we did. First, we did a TV piece, and then we did co-produced with television, which came out in 2013, about the queer history, also following protagonists from after the war until fall of the wall, which was 1990. And then, of course, it was needed to do something also about West Berlin. So I did something about West Berlin, which was for some reason also missing. No one ever did this, which is really sad because you also know a lot of people, they don't live forever. And for some reason, sometimes the actual or the current generation misses to ask the generation before. Maybe they would rather ask two generations before them because that's not so close to them, but they are already dead, so they're usually missing it. It's the same thing like, for example, the 70s political movement in West Berlin. They kind of missed to really interview and follow up the people who did all the work in the late 40s and 50s and 60s,
Okay.
because those were the people who really made also the liberalization of that paragraph 175, which is also, I think, famous in the States. There's also a film about it, which was done by the states, and so or from the San Francisco filmmakers. And so I did this, and this came out in 2017. And then we thought we should rather do a trilogy. So 1990 to 2000 or 2020 or up to date was missing. And of course, this was a little bit more difficult because you can't tell stories as chronological as you could do before, because I mean, there are so many different perspectives. All people are still
Hmm.
alive. Everyone has something different. Also, there are a lot of people who are really influencing Berlin, a lot who are here just for 3, 5, 8 or 10 years. Think about the people who are refugees who arrived here. Think about all the expats, whatever. So you can't put them all in a film because some stories they would just start 3 or 5 years ago.
Exactly.
So we picked 6 people and followed them over. First of all, I mean, we wanted to follow them just for 1 or 2 years, but then came COVID, and at some part in the film, COVID became a very, very big thing. So we kind of almost filmed the film 3 times, once with tons of masks, which you don't see anymore, then with half of them, and now there are only some left, and the COVID part is really very small in it. But so the older of these people, they kind of have like these back memories, or they think about how they arrived, how it was like maybe even back in the early 70s when one of them arrived, or in the 80s, or in the mid 90s, or early 2000s, where really many of the situations for queer people were much different than they are today.
I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but of your subjects, there's a combination of people who moved to Berlin because they specifically wanted to move to Berlin, the other people who moved there because they had to. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
I mean, in the end, all people who move to Berlin for some reason have to. I mean, there are also people who come from another city in Germany, and that city is during the week, or for gay people at some point, so boring or so non-interesting that they have to leave, or when they come from the countryside in Germany. Or so we have only one German protagonist, and for example, I mean, there are different waves. I mean, you have to see, like, before the fall of the wall, like Berlin was really kind of a closed shop and kind of a little bit a closed society. There were also foreigners. There were Turkish immigrants who were here. There were some black people from the U.S. Army, like when still the military was there. But in the end, it was kind of a white Western society with a lot of old people, because there was not so much economy in Berlin while it was within the wall. And there were students who, some of them just went there because when you went to Berlin, you didn't have to do service at the army. So with the fall of the wall, first, all the East Germans came to Berlin, and they kind of revitalized the city. And this is when all the techno and whatever's started. And for them, it was already like a movement to go to the city. And then towards the end of the 90s, this big EasyJet tourism started, that people from all over came to Berlin because the flights were so cheap, and they saw the city and they thought, this is right, like really nice. And then there was 2006, there were like the world championship of football, and many people came and they thought, oh, what a great summer and what a great city. It's so nice. Germany is not as we really thought it would be. So a lot of people, like from also United States, from many European and non-European countries, also moved to Berlin because they saw, oh, the rents are really cheap here. I could live here either the towards once I'm retired, or I can live here as a young person and experience myself, because it's not like London or New York where I have to work and then maybe experience myself 5%. Here, maybe I have to work 15% and experience myself 85% of the time.
Exactly.
So this was that. And then we had the financial crisis. The financial crisis, there were like the northern states in Europe and the southern states in Europe. And Germany was one of those states which was very strict on all this, like that the southern states had to save money. So, I mean, everything collapsed really in countries like Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece. And a lot of young people, I mean, they could either choose by moving back to their families and stay with their families without having a job. They had like jobless rates of 25% or higher, or maybe move to Germany, and then why not directly to Berlin with its nightlife and everything. So that was another wave of people who came. And then with the start of the Syrian war, and especially 2015, a lot of refugees from the Arab countries arrived, also from Afghanistan. And they also bring a lot of queer people coming here. And there are parallel movements, for example, like when like 2006 or 7, it started really to deteriorate for queer people in Russia,
Hmm.
that a lot of Russian people already started to move towards the West and arrived in Berlin. And all this mixture is now happening here in the city, while the city as well gets more and more expensive. There's a big problem with housing. People don't know really where to live. The pensions of people are usually really low in Berlin, because also a lot of people here have like broken biographies. I mean, some people are HIV positive and didn't work for many years, and then the future looked differently, that they were able to work, but they missed all these years to pay into the pension and all these things. So all this is coming together, and this is kind of this mixture, which I think is pretty unique in Berlin. And
Exactly.
so you also can see this in different areas, and different queer areas also have kind of a different kind of sortage of different nationalities.
Exactly. One of the things that I was, taken with the film is that, you know, 5, 10 years ago, we didn't have quite our community wasn't quite as diverse, and I guess in a sense, gays and lesbians are just two of the terms that we use today for our community. Can you sort
Yeah,
of talk about the fact that we have transgender communities and people who use different labels and identify
yeah,
differently than they did 10 years ago?
yeah. So that's another thing which you really can see in Berlin, but I would say that in Germany the situation is different than in the States.
Yep.
I mean, out in East Berlin, you could see, like, because the community was so small and the pressure of the state was kind of strong, although it was kind of allowed, that lesbians and gay people worked as much together as they could, but also were separate, because sometimes, it doesn't harmonize. In West Berlin, uh, there was a fallout. This fallout started like in the end of the 80s, like where the lesbians kind of a little bit split from gay people, because they thought gay people wouldn't be as clear distancing from what happened within their community somewhere with pedophilia, whatever. So there was a longer kind of break in this. And this restarted in the early 90s, that lesbians and gays fought together for marriage, which
Mhm.
was then 2016, 17 was kind of inaugurated as our marriage act. Also pretty late, but before we had something like a partnership. And what the film shows is like that, of course, like with all movements, like the trans movement, intersex movement, bisexuals, people who look on things much more intersectional than just looking only gay and only lesbian, but where's the social part of it, or where do you really come from, what is your origin, what other kind of problems you have to deal with. uh, it's kind of a pretty diverse community, and there's always this part who would say the community is split. it's too much split. We don't concentrate really on the enemies outside because we are more fighting at each other or with each other. And others would say all this really has to be discussed at every moment, like the same thing with socialism. There is no side aspect or side argument in socialism. All is one main thing to look at, and all details and all aspects have to be worked on at every moment at the same time. And you can see this very much in Berlin. I mean, we have up to, in some years, up to 13 different pride marches of
Yeah.
like different organizations or groups who found themselves together. We have non-binary club sex parties, nights. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot happening, and also I just wanted to show that all this is happening at the same time, and I think you. And it's a little bit more when you see the film than just showing that it's all happening at the same time. But that's more when you see the film.
Sure. There's so many fascinating subjects in this film. Like I could talk to you for so long, but one of the subjects I was really quite taken with was Jean Auric.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about his journey, moving to Berlin and then, from New York and just sort of adapting to New York? I'm sorry, adapting to Berlin.
Yeah. Jean-Louis Ulrich, he's from Haiti originally, and with his family he moved to New York, where he went to school. He went to the Studio 54. He was not a rich kid, but he was a kid who also found his way. He's an artist. He studied primarily architecture. He worked in architectural studios, but now is mainly a painter and even more so kind of perform and yeah, he does like performative art projects, and he was in I think he got a grant to be in Paris for a while, and from there he visited Berlin. Berlin at the time, in '95, there was, maybe you remember Christo, the Reichstag, which is our parliament, which was, burned down by the Nazis in the 20s.
Yeah.
It was all covered by Christo, like in a package, and he saw that and he thought, what an atmosphere, what a city, I really would like to move here. And so he moved here in the early 2000s or around 2000, and and he even can remember when he was there. He had choices within a week where he would like to move for work, where he would like to move for living, because it was so easy back then. And he got attacked, and he did this very special project about being attacked as a black person, which he said in that intensity or also in that way never happened to him before in the States.
Mm-hmm.
We also know for a black person it's maybe not always the nicest situation. And so he's one of these people who really were in New York under this pressure of really having to work maybe 110% for their income, and then having minus 20% for their fun. And in Berlin, he really cut down his numbers. He is lucky to even have a small studio where he lives in, with a coal oven, which costs nowadays, you would say, really next to nothing. And so he can do whatever he wants to do, and you can see like these different aspects of some people really want to be very successful in Berlin. Other people, they want to have success, but mainly they also want to enjoy it. They don't want to have too much pressure on themselves. They need the space. They need to be left alone, which is also a big thing in Berlin, that you really can be left alone. I mean, we find Berlin now with all the tourists and the expats and all people who moved here pretty full at the moment.
Mhm.
But I know some people when they come from New York and they come to Berlin and they walk through some of these streets, which in Berlin are called the main shopping streets, they would say, "Where are the people?" You know, because everything is so wide and there's never such a, it's never so tense as in Paris or whatever. And so we are following his story and yeah, I know him for a couple of years, and I always found his story really interesting because he has also many good observations, which are always not the mainstream observations about life. And this is what I was looking also for the people. The people are not very famous in the film, in the films before, there were the famous ones, or some of them were the famous ones, because it was all also really important to talk about like how the movement started, and you needed those people to tell about that.
Mhm.
But here we wanted that no one of them is a cliche. That the Syrian dancer who works kind of almost belly dancer and performer and actor, that he's not that cliche what you expect, that they all have these like little things where you would think, oh my god, this is like really strange, or there's something in this biography which is maybe not 300% sympathetic, or here I don't I disagree or whatever, because I hated to have these 0815, we would call these people who just represent something in the best ever, which is not human, in the best and most complete and most moralistic, 100% perfect way.
The film is Queer Exile Berlin. It's fascinating. I'm so happy that we're able to share it with our audiences this year. And thank you so much, Johan, for taking time to talk with us. What's next for you in the film?
What's next for me in the film? I have a couple of films where I film parallelly, where I have to think about to get funding for. I mean, at the moment, for example, also people like Folsom Europe asked me to do a historical film about Folsom Europe. You have Folsom San Francisco, and maybe some people who are in Atlanta have been here. It's been full of Americans. They want to have a historical film. I started to help out with them. I started to help them out and filmed a little bit a week ago, but I want to do a film with my archival material, but told on a fictional person of my archival material, which I filmed within the last 35 years. And that's what I am trying to do next. And there are three other projects, but in the end, it's also sometimes nice just not to do anything, and usually sometimes to travel to festivals and relax.
Okay.
So enjoy the film. I hope you like it. You can always write to us or give a feedback. There's Jochen Hick, Galeria Alaska Productions on Facebook. There's also Queer Exile Berlin on Facebook. The site is up, the Facebook site, within the next days, but you can already contact it and enjoy it and recommend it. And if anyone writes about it, please send us the clips. Okay, so thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much, Johan.
Okay, thanks.